Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. This is the first official video in my Insidious Aspects of Social Justice series, and I wanted to do this first one on divisiveness because I think that several elements of this topic build particularly well off the introduction video. I originally wanted to include control and divisiveness together in one video because I believe that the two ideas are very closely linked. However, I think that if I tried to do that, we'd be looking at a 30+ minute video, and people complained the last time I did that. Instead, I think I'll try and save control for last, because I actually think it will tie the whole series together quite nicely. For now, I have noticed a pattern that I want to walk through in this video. A lot of social justice touts itself on wanting everyone to be equal and have the same opportunities and to be able to live their best lives. Now, not to go all hippie on everyone, but when I envision a world of equality, I imagine a world not necessarily where everyone has the exact same material things as each other. It's just not realistic. You can't possibly expect a heart surgeon to work as much as he does and earn the same as someone working at McDonald's. But without going too far down that rabbit hole, I envision a world where we all regard each other with the same human kindness and basic decency, that we don't treat each other differently because of superficial differences like our skin color or sexual preferences. Instead, we focus on what we give back to the world around us, the kinds of people we are. This may not look like the same thing from each person. Again, different people will be able to accomplish different kinds or different amounts of things. But the important thing is the way we treat each other. I know, not exactly the most realistic thing. I'm a bit of an idealist. But this is the kind of thing I envision when I think about equality. In social justice, however, their calculus around trying to make everyone equal often fixates on the differences between people. Not only that, it tends to highlight and magnify these differences. And then it takes those differences and it does its very best to tell people how those differences either contribute to or subtract from their ability to lead an equal life as compared with everyone else. In order to explain this more thoroughly, let's begin with a little idea called intersectionality. Now, for those who may not know, the concept of intersectionality was originally a legal concept coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw, challenging single-issue analyses in issues of discrimination. That is to say, a court focusing solely on the fact that a plaintiff is either black or a woman misses the fact that as a woman who is also black, they have the potential to experience multiple kinds of discriminatory behaviors simultaneously. So, in itself, the original message was really just intended to get people to try to see the multiple layers in which a person may be impacted by the factors of their identity. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that, hey, that's not really an offensive message. In fact, I would almost go as far as to say it's a pretty banal message. I may experience something that I wouldn't otherwise experience because I'm a woman. I may experience something that I wouldn't experience because I'm white. That guy may experience something because he's Japanese that he wouldn't experience if he was black. That guy living in Japan may experience life very differently than that guy living in Europe or the USA. It should be a no-brainer. Different aspects of our life all come together to impact the way we experience our life. In other news, water is wet, the sky is blue, and salt and vinegar is objectively the best flavor of potato chip, and fight me IRL if you disagree. However, this message has become, well, distorted, especially in the past decade. To give you an example, let's navigate to a lovely little website called Intersectionality Score. Now, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm about 99% certain this is a satire site, but satire or not, it provides a great visual example of the way intersectionality is often used these days. It's summarized in the first quote you see on the page. The theory that the overlap of various social identities, such as race, gender, and sexuality, define your level of systemic oppression. You know, as if you can run down a checklist of boxes and have a little calculator spit out a number that tells you exactly how oppressed you are. Well, if you'll excuse my very subtle foreshadowing, I'm going to go ahead and run down this checklist of boxes, slider scales, and see how I stack up. Okay, so just running through this really quickly. I would say I am white. A little bit more straight than I am gay, but definitely not fully straight. Fully female. Definitely not transgender. Probably middle class is about right. I'd say on average, I'm about a third of the way through my life. Mostly able-bodied, except for a bum knee, kind of. Speak nothing but English, so we'll just go with that. Am born in Canada. More educated with a master's degree and not religious. And, so yeah, seeing the add your own slider there is kind of like, yeah, okay, I can see this being satire. But yeah, apparently I am more privileged than 44% of others based on these categories. So there you have it. Now, again, even if this site in specific is satire, there are other measures like this that are being used seriously. Even my own place of employment did that rather well-known take one step forward, one step backward privilege test that essentially covers the same points. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll include a link to one in the low bar so you can test it for yourself. On that note, let me go ahead and provide my first example of what a scenario might look like if someone was using social justice style thinking, and if they were not. Now, add 1 point to your score if you identify as male. Subtract 1 point if you identify as female. I never really thought about it before, but I guess I really am in the less privileged category as a woman. They have always had more access to different careers, have always been treated with respect. They aren't expected to do anything around the house. We have to have all the babies and sacrifice our careers to raise them. And on top of that, we have to deal with things like catcalling and being afraid of being attacked at night on the streets. Subtracting a point for being a woman makes sense. Excuse me, but I reject the notion that a simple binary like this accurately represents the situation here at all. Sure, women may have some unique concerns they have to deal with, but so do men. For every way you can look at a woman's experience as a negative, like maybe women more often having to stay home and raise the children, you can look at it as a positive. Like women are supported more often to stay at home and raise the children, which is often a very fulfilling role. With extended leave and financial supports relative to men, the same is true of men's experiences. Reducing it down to one sex has it better and the other has it harder oversimplifies the situation and minimizes the many positive elements that come with being a woman. This second example was my actual experience, paraphrased of course, when my work put on the presentation that had that +1, -1 privilege test. These styles of tests, where we act like we can just plot people on a chart and say, this is your oppression score, vastly oversimplify the human experience and degrade our ability to examine the complexities of life. I mean, if you imagine that such a test asks only one question about wealth, and 7 questions about race, sex, sexual orientation, and so forth, you could conceivably have a rich black woman that scores higher on the oppression scale than a poor white male. Like, I'm sure if you ask any white homeless man on the street if he would like to trade places with poor, underprivileged Oprah, I'm sure they would be happy to give up a few of their privilege points to take her up on the offer. I know not all discussions on intersectionality are quite as obtuse as assigning an oppression score to people, but almost all discussions on this topic have at least a grounding in the idea that there are some people who necessarily have more power than others, and those who are necessarily more marginalized by virtue of several different factors, many of which are often out of one's control. There are a few problems with that strategy. First, highlighting differences between people in this manner actually reduces the chances that they will behave in a cooperative manner. You can see this in many examples, but a good basic example is the collective action problem. That is, a situation in which individuals would be better cooperating, but competing interests prevent them from doing so, like the prisoner's dilemma. Individuals primed to look for the differences in others may be more likely to turn inward and begin focusing on their own self-interest. This is especially so if the person is made to feel shunned or alienated for their differences. It is triply true if the person is treated as though their differences are a problem that no amount of work on their part will properly overcome. Next, I really think that categorizing people in this hierarchical way can result in some dysfunctional and oversimplifying thinking patterns. You'll note that this circle doesn't differentiate between someone who, say, hoards billions of dollars while their workers starve, and someone who donates much of their wealth to charity, or someone who uses their scientific education to create medicines to save the world, versus those who use that education to commit war crimes. It takes a very broad range of human experiences and puts them into easily digestible chunks. Furthermore, and I'm going to go over this topic a bit more in detail in my Guilt as a Weapon video in this series, but by casting some people in the powerful circle and others in the marginalized circle, you train people to look at these differences between others in an adversarial manner. It's no longer men, women, and gender minorities all have different experiences from each other that result in different life circumstances. Now, it's a hierarchy between the three, with men supposedly on top. You don't see how this might make the women and gender minorities trained in this style of thinking feel a little bit of negativity or enviousness towards the people supposedly on top? Or make the poor men feel confused, misunderstood, or feeling uncertain about what to do to make other people feel better. Further to this point, people in the so-called marginalized groups may begin seeing what might be otherwise benign or at least neutral behaviors in the privileged groups as negative or flaunting their power. Take the concept of mansplaining, for example. Let me provide another illustration scenario. And note, this is just an example and is not reflective of my actual views. I have a very strong opinion on the topic of euthanasia. I think it should be banned entirely.
Oh, but there's a lot of cases where it can be a useful thing to consider, like in terminal cancer patients, like my grandmother, or people who've been suffering for many years. It's a little excessive to state that there's never a good use for it.
Wow, okay. I have actually taken a lot of time to read on this subject, so I think I know what I'm talking about, and I really don't need you mansplaining to me about your opinion, thanks. Well, I've read a lot of stories about where it's abused, and I think that it can be too much of a slippery slope to freely allow it, but thank you for taking the time to share your opinion with me. I really appreciate that. This is a situation where we unnecessarily run the risk of injecting malicious intent where there likely never was any. A man in any such situation could be trying to explain something as a means of dismissing the woman's beliefs, but they could also be explaining because they are passionate about it, or because they have also studied the subject and want to present an alternate viewpoint, or even just because they enjoy engaging people in discussion. By framing it as a male having a power-over relationship with the woman, it turns what could be a normal conversation into a territorial pissing match. Similarly, on the race side of things, many people will lay a lot of social problems at the foot of white supremacy, whether or not the situation is actually related to that problem at all. It has become a very easy scapegoat for a lot of issues where other explanations could reasonably be inserted. It's not that many police officers have little more than a high school degree and a 6-month physical fitness regimen, and that they are not expected to attend university or complete any ethics courses that causes problems. It's all about white supremacy. It's not that X ethnic group makes up less of the North American population than Caucasian people that accounts for their lower representation in many career fields. It's all about white supremacy. And framing things in this way stokes the fires of negativity and distrust and helps to fuel demands that those in power must do this or that or pay various amounts of money to make up for their transgressions that many of them have never had any individual hand in. This quite naturally causes these groups to feel alienated, which may result in any number of negative outcomes, ranging from unearned guilt and shame on one end, to discomfort and avoidance of the groups they are claimed to have transgressed against, to outright reactionary hatred on the other end. On the other hand, you will of course have some people who accept this narrative and work to challenge their unearned privilege, but many of these will be token efforts that will likely appease very few people. They will certainly not give up their jobs or their homes for people they feel are less privileged than them, and the few that do will either be called out for not doing enough, or will be called out for pandering. Either way, it's almost never enough. And unfortunately, the divide that is caused by all of this only seems to be getting stronger. I will end this video here. I'm not 100% certain which one I'll be working on next, but I've been feeling like the lionizing of weakness subject has been calling my name, so I think that'll be it. So for now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.